to paraphrase words that were used by Yaakov Avinu in the Torah, albeit in a different context. He said, Ze esrim shana anochi imach. These 20 years I've been with you. I said, he mentioned that he used that obviously in a different context, but this is the 20th year anniversary of the falling of a great Jewish leader. For many of us, we could say our Rebbe, our guide, a light in his generation. It's 20 years. This is like it's actually a generation. We have kids here who are not even 20 years old yet. But it's a whole different world today than it was 20 years ago. And then the Neshama of Meir David ben Yecheskel Shraga HaKohen Hashem Yinkom Damav should get nachas from seeing that there are young people who care about the message, the immortal message that Rabbi Meir Kahane left behind. 20 years seems like it was yesterday. I had just moved from New York back to LA, where I grew up, and I was with great anticipation waiting to meet Rabbi Meir Kahane for the first time. I'd never seen him speak in public. I never had an encounter. I had just been employed by then Esha Torah. It was looked quite different 20 years ago. And it wasn't to be. So these last 20 years I've spent a lot of time thinking about his message, learning more about his life, learning inside his words, both in English and in Hebrew. And there's much more to the man that was portrayed in the media, that's for sure. And I'm speaking to two of his close friends and Talmidim. When I speak to Ira and Jerry, I'm not telling you anything new. But I'm going to say and share is just a little tribute, perhaps an insight into something about Rabbi Meir Kahane that he, more than anything else, in my opinion, exemplified in his service to Hashem. A couple of parshas ago, we came to the episode of Lot being abducted, the nephew of Avram. And there's one pasuk that stands out in this entire parsha, in my opinion. It says in the verse, Vayavo hapalit vayaged Avram. After Lot was captured, the captive, hapalit, the one, or actually not the captive, but the survivor, some say it was Og Melech HaBashan, came and told Avram, hey, Lot, your nephew has been captured. Avram was up there somewhere north of Shechem with his buddies Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. And he heard what happened to his nephew. Now, what's interesting, I just read Avram's name, and next to it, it calls him an Ivri. But for already many verses we've heard of Avraham, but we've never heard him identified as an Ivri, which means in English a Hebrew. So what does that mean? Why here, of all places, does it identify Avram, ha-Ivri, with the appellation of being a Hebrew? Couldn't it have been in a different place? There were 9 other trials. Maybe we were first introduced to Avram Avinu in the beginning, when he leaves Haran, his home, and he makes his way to Eretz Canaan. So I'm going to answer this question with an anecdote. There was a great, I guess you could say, secular personality by the name of Arthur Goldberg, somewhat of a liberal, who served as an ambassador to the United Nations. I think he was also a Supreme Court Justice. And several years ago, maybe 30 years ago, he decided to make a study about what was the Jewish community's reaction in America to the Holocaust in Europe. During those years of 39 to 1945, what was the collective response of American Jewry? 2 years he commissioned such a study at his own expense. After 2 years, he came to the conclusion, he saw the results, and he reported them, both in written form and in a press conference, and he said it was a dismal failure. American collective response to what was happening to the brothers and sisters in Europe was a dismal failure, with the exception of one group called Hatzalah, and general the Orthodox Jewry, more to the right. And this guy, Mickey Tress, of blessed memory, Michael Tress, spearheaded this cadre of people who saw the bigger picture, who would get in cars and taxis on Shabbos and go to congregations, raise money, bribe money, sneaking provisions into the camps or to the ghettos, and basically saving Jews, bottom line. Even when the government said we will have no negotiations with the Nazis or any of their representatives. And basically they broke laws to be able to do that they saw as immoral. They're actually preventing lives from being saved. That wasn't an easy thing to do. So he asked the question, Arthur Goldberg, so why did they do this? He was wondering from a secular point of view, why would Jews jeopardize themselves with the law, go out of their way for people they have never seen and maybe they don't even speak the same language, unless it's Yiddish? And the answer was in this pasuk. Because we see that Abraham could have easily said, you know what, Lot, you decided to live next to the Sodomites, you should serve the same fate as them. As it says in Pirkei Avos, Oy leRasha, oy leShcheno. Woe to the wicked and woe to his neighbor. You made your bed, sleep in it. But Avram couldn't do that. Avram was impelled, because he was an Ivri, because he was a Hebrew, that you should risk everything when your brother's life is at stake. You would think it's crazy. A man of his age, running up to the north, maybe one person with him, Eliezer, some say, or 318 other soldiers, against these mighty warriors. But that was Avram. When I think of the spirit of Avram Avinu and the reaction, I can only think of one person in the last half century who put his life out for Klal Yisrael like this. Who couldn't rest if he saw that Soviet Jewry was suffering behind the Iron Curtain. Where Jews on the streets of even Los Angeles and in New York and different places, elderly Jews could not cross the street, couldn't get to the store and back without being attacked. There was someone who cared, who was an Ivri more than anything else. In 1975, when he protested the visit of a Russian, was it the president or the prime minister? I'm not sure. By throwing himself in front of a motorcade and getting himself arrested. He didn't have to do that. But he felt that, no, he had to do that. He wouldn't rest until he knew that he had brought to the attention of the American public, Jewish American public in particular, not to be apathetic, because we're going to repeat the same thing. These are our people. They're Jewish people like anyone else. No one put it on the map, the issue, the plight of the Soviet Jewry more than Meir Kahane. I learned this all after. Achrimos Kadoshim, after he passed away. I knew nothing about this beforehand. Another anecdote, just to demonstrate what it means to be Avram and Ivri. After he was elected to the Knesset in 1984, and again, I'm not going to go over the history, although some of you young people should probably read up on this as much as you can, because you'll see the greatness of a leader of the Jewish people. My brother, Zosai Gazubal, that's right, the Rav's widow has written a biography about her blessed husband. So you can get this information, some of it. But this is one I heard myself, that you would think that you're elected to the Knesset, you're part of now an elite group of equivalent to senators or parliamentary members, and you're not in touch with the people anymore. You're a lawmaker. So it was maybe 85 or 86, I'm not sure what year it was, but he was coming outside the Knesset and walking not far from the central bus station. He's walking, or he's making a taxi, or he's assisted by a couple of aides. And an elderly woman came up to him, and he said, like in the type of a language, you lawmakers, you politicians, you don't even know what it's like to suffer. I have no heat. It's cold in the winter. What are you going to do for me? So one of the aides thought this was inappropriate. Do you know who you're talking to? You're talking to a great rabbi, and he's also, The rabbi silenced him and says, tell me more, what's the problem? He says, and now she got calm. I says, I don't know how to, it's cold. It's really cold here. And Again, the aide was getting impatient and thinking, someone will help her. Come on, Rebbe, you can do, you have other things to do. He says, no, she's right. And he flagged down the next taxi, got in the taxi, drove into the center of town to an appliance store, bought one of those portable heaters, put it back in the taxi, and delivered it right to her. So she was waiting there in the street with his aides. And he demonstrated what it means to be an Ivri. You may be this great scholar, you could be a politician, you could be sitting in the Knesset of Israel, but you can't forget the simple person why you were there in the first place. To reach out to another Jew. In a tangible way, with his own hands and own money. There are more stories like this. I'm not the one to tell these stories. To my great dismay and lack, I didn't have this personal connection. I didn't have a chance to, within days before he was assassinated, that I was supposed to meet him. Another point. There are certain individuals who brought Jewish concepts to the forefront and to the focus of otherwise sleeping Jews. I have to say that many of the writings and the lectures that I've seen of Meir Kahane, Shemin Kom Damav, have literally grabbed me by my Jewish beard and picked my eyes up so that I could see in full focus what this world is all about. Who we are and how we should be motivated that God spoke to the Jews. The message of the Torah was to the Jew first, and only to the Jew, technically. And that it's not what people think. It's so easy. Someone approached me the other day when I told them the Yortzeit of Meir Kahane was coming up, and he said, "Oh, that was that rabbi who was the militant rabbi who used to yell about they must go and death to the Arabs and all these types of things." He says, "You would have no idea what you're talking about. His message was love Jews, and whatever it takes to preserve Jewish life, we will do." Because that's what we're enjoying to do so. From our teachings of the Torah, from the Talmud, from the Rambam. It's not racism, it's protectionism. It's survival. That's I've learned that over time. I was awakened, I was picked up, I was excited and moved beyond words when I read in his own pen how a Jew should be. How an Ivri acts, how he responds to the needs of his people. And then the rest of the world will get it. Another religious group which has messianic yearnings, one can say over the last 50 years, has put the issue of Mashiach on the map in our conversation. And I say that's a very important concept. Yes, it's important. It's a piece of the Yeshua is one of the things that is asked of a person in your life. Did you look forward to the redemption? Did you do things to kind of hasten the redemption? In fact, it's one of the 13 principles of faith. Number 12, from the Rambam, the Maimonides writes, Ani mami be'amuna shlema be'vias HaMashiach. I believe with the coming of Mashiach. Afav b'shiyas mameh, even though he delays. Even so, every single day, every single moment, I hope that he comes. The people can be lulled into thinking that that's Judaism. That's really what it's all about. We are pre-Messianic period, and we should be looking forward to having Mashiach come and take care of everything, rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, bring back ingather the exiled Jewish people, expel our enemies, and bring world peace. That's a wonderful notion, but that's something that is going to happen when God chooses for it to happen, and albeit we're waiting for it. But what do we do in between? How do we participate in that process? So the Talmud gives a couple of answers. I'm going to end on this because there's other speakers who wish to share their insights and commemorate his memory. And I would say this concept. Ma yasa adam what should a person do and be protected from the Chevlei Mashiach? To be protected from the birth pangs, from the travails of the coming of Mashiach, which are the things we're experiencing right here and now. Yasok b'Torah u'gemilas chasadim. Should be occupied with Torah knowledge, acquire as much learning as you can, and to be involved in acts of kindness. Rabbi Meir Kahane, of blessed memory, did more than anyone else in his generation possibly to bring that. Because he wasn't just a scholar, he was a doer. He was a mover. He was moved and motivated to see that other Jews got the message. He sacrificed his life literally because he was a Jew. I once even asked one of the Gedolei Torah, and the Gedolei Torah, many of the great Torah scholars, were not in his camp. In fact, some of them, like Rav Shach, would say, "Oy to the woe to us, because our lives are being jeopardized by Meir Kahane." And another Gadol I asked after he had passed away, he said, God forbid we should even say those things. He was martyred because he was a Jew. He's a kadosh. A kadosh means he's been sanctified even more in his death, perhaps during his life, like a Rabbi Akiva, who's martyred at the hands of the Romans. It's no different. So my comment about the Mashiach, to make his memory that even more, not that he needs me to make it even more lustrous than it already is, but this is what I gained from this. I gained that there's there's in fact no mention directly about Mashiach in the Torah in itself for a purpose. Because the Mashiach, whatever will happen at that time, as the Rambam says, we'll know and it'll be obvious, and yes, all those great things are going to happen. But we shouldn't divert our attention from what our role is right now, every single day, as we breathe and live as Jews. To be proud of that Judaism and to do something about it. To do something that makes a difference in the lives of your family and your friends and the rest of the Jewish people. We just can't sit back and just hope, Mashiach will come and take care of everything, solve all our problems. We have to be engaged in that process. It says in the Talmud, three things come in a way of diversion. I don't know how to translate exactly. Three things come when you least expect them. A find, an object that's like a treasure trove, the Mashiach, and a scorpion. Interesting combination that the sages came up with. What is the connection between these three things? A find, the Mashiach, and a scorpion. So the Maharal of Prague says a beautiful thought on this. The sages are actually telling us that there's two ways for the Mashiach to come. It comes like the sweetness of finding something precious. It comes out of our own merits. Actually, finding something and discovering something that you weren't expecting is not necessarily because of your own efforts, but it's sweet when you do find it. And Mashiach can come in a different way. It can come like the sting of a scorpion that hurts. And the Maharal says the choice is ours. What we do with that time as we're waiting for Mashiach to come will make a big difference in how we experience it. Each one of us is responsible for that. And I submit to you that in the merit of the words that are being shared and the fact that you've bothered to come out tonight to commemorate the life of a great, great Jewish leader, that we should be instilled and motivated to do even more acts of kindness, to learn more Torah, to dedicate ourselves to understanding, in fact, Rav Meir Kahane's Torah, which, in my opinion, is pure, hits to the heart. And if you can learn in the vernacular, even much better. In the original Hebrew, because he was a scholar par excellence. And as you're going to hear from my brother, he should be well, he has some even further insights on how he was the transformation of, I've seen it myself, and in a positive way of my brother has been through the teachings, the writings of the Rav Meir Kahane.